All right, we're following some breaking news right here on MSNBC today. We just got a hold of two transcripts within the last half an hour. Transcripts from two pieces of testimony. Timothy Morrison, who was just released moments ago, also of Jennifer Williams. And these are important individuals because they were both on that call between President Zelensky as well as with President Trump. Let's go straight to NBC News' White House reporter Mike Vicara. And Vic, we start at the top of the hour. We're just about to go to you. And then we get, that happens all the time. We get the email. We think it's because of the OMB official, Mark Sandy, who just left, right?
Just left.
That might be we'll get some release of what's happening. And indeed, it's of two individuals that aren't necessarily top of mind, but are clearly essential because they were in the proverbial room, right? So what did you learn? I know you've been going through it.
Right, and we are still going through it, if truth be told, Richard. Looking for some things that we didn't already know from previous released, or should we say leaked, information. But first and foremost, I think the thing that jumps out at me, and again, we've gone through this very preliminarily at this point, was that Jennifer Williams, and this is the individual who is the top advisor on Russia and Europe to Vice President Pence, who was, again, on that July 25th call, says she thought it was unusual and inappropriate and shed some light on possible motivations for withholding the military aid that Ukraine was set to get, that $400 million as they fight that action against Russian-backed irregulars in eastern Ukraine in the Donbass. This individual, Jennifer Williams, again, on the call. The other individual, the transcript that we received just a few minutes ago, Timothy Morrison. He is the top advisor on Russia and Europe for the National Security Council. And interestingly, he is the individual who replaced Dr. Fiona Hill, who is one of those people who has marched down there to the bottom of the basement of the visitor center of the Capitol and testified in that secure room, the SCIF. He says that Fiona Hill, talking about Fiona Hill, warned him about this parallel diplomatic efforts in Ukraine. Of course, that refers to the efforts, the official diplomatic channels, and then this back channel that Rudy Giuliani and his associates had established directly to the president, including Gordon Sondland. He was also concerned that the July 25th call between the president and President Zelensky would have a negative impact on the politics. However, and this has been reported, he told investigators he thought there was nothing illegal about that call. And in the days after the July 25th call, he said he was not concerned about the content of the call. And yet he learned that the transcript of the call, or the summary of the call, had been placed in that elevated classification that we've heard about so much, and was wondering why, in fact, that happened. So again, Richard, we're still going through it here, looking for new bits of information as these transcripts have been released late on a Saturday. And just to review, there was long testimony behind closed doors today from Mark Sandy, of course. He is an official with the Office of Management and Budget, and the reason that is significant is because we are told through Ms. Cooper at the Department of Defense, in other testimony, that the OMB was the one who had told the Department of Defense not to release that $400 million in military aid to Ukraine that they so desperately wanted. And as the deadline, the budget deadline approached on September 30th, after which that money could not have been sent to them, according to the budget rules of the U.S. government, that she had been told by the Office of Management and Budget that there was, in fact, a hold on that money. So the process still unfolding. We're still going through this, trying to find these new information to report to you, Richard, but that's what we have so far.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.